The ground beneath Naples, Italy, is rising. Not slowly, not metaphorically. It is physically lifting 10 millimeters every single month, and the 500,000 people living directly above it have no idea what that means. Scientists are using language they have never used before. The word they keep coming back to is threshold, as in the system is approaching one, as in once it crosses it, what happens next is no longer in their control. The thing underneath Naples is not a standard volcano. It is a supervolcano caldera 13 kilometers across. Its name, translated directly from Italian, is Burning Fields. And in 2026, the instruments monitoring it are recording numbers that have triggered a formal escalation in alert status. This is not a what if. This is not a distant geological possibility. The Italian government's own civil protection authority has 500,000 people on an evacuation plan right now, one level below the order to leave. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly what Campi Flegrei is, why scientists in 2026 are describing it with language they have never used before, and why the two new studies published in 2023 and 2025 changed everything researchers thought they understood about how this system works. You're going to understand the pressure cooker mechanism, a process that was completely missed for decades of monitoring and that fundamentally changes the risk calculation. You are going to understand the ring fault, what it is, where it sits, why it was invisible until artificial intelligence found it. And you are going to understand the one variable that nobody in the mainstream coverage has addressed directly, the warning window. How much time would actually exist between the moment this system reaches its critical threshold and the moment it releases? Because that answer is not what anyone wants to hear. Stay with this past the 4-minute mark, because what comes next is the detail that separates this from every other volcano story you have ever seen. Campi Flegrei is not a mountain. That is the first thing that separates it from every volcano image in your head. It has no cone, no peak, no visible summit. It is a caldera, a collapsed depression in the Earth's crust left behind by eruptions so large that the ground above them fell inward. The caldera is 13 kilometers across. To put that in physical terms, it is a geological structure the size of a major metropolitan district sitting directly beneath the western outskirts of Naples and the city of Pozzuoli. You can walk across it and not know you're inside it. The last time Campi Flegrei produced what scientists classify as a mega-eruption was 39,000 years ago. That event put enough ash and debris into the upper atmosphere to cool the climate across an entire continent. Researchers believe it contributed directly to the collapse of Neanderthal populations across Europe. The ash column from that eruption reached 18 miles into the sky. The debris spread across what is now Europe and Russia. One volcanic event from the single system reshaped the biological history of an entire continent. The most recent significant eruption was in 1538. That event was preceded by 2 years of ground uplift and a series of earthquakes. It produced a new volcanic hill, Monte Nuovo, in about a week. It killed dozens of people. It was, by the standards of what this system is capable of, minor. Since 2005, the ground at Campi Flegrei has been rising continuously. Total uplift from 2005 to 2026 has exceeded 140 centimeters. That is nearly 5 feet of ground rising beneath a living city. In February and March of 2026 alone, the system produced between 47 and 70 earthquakes per week. On June 30th, 2025, a magnitude 4.6 earthquake, the strongest in decades, was felt across all of Naples and caused minor structural damage to buildings in the immediate area. The Italian Civil Protection Authority responded by maintaining a yellow alert across the entire Campi Flegrei zone. Yellow is one level below the alert that triggers evacuation. The red zone evacuation plan, the one already written, already rehearsed, covers 500,000 people. Here is what that number means operationally. 500,000 people, one evacuation window. And that window, as you will understand by the end of this video, may be much shorter than any plan assumes. But the earthquake frequency and the ground uplift are not the most important development of the last 3 years. What changed the entire scientific picture of Campi Flegrei was not what the instruments detected. It was what researchers realized they had been missing entirely. For decades, the primary model for Campi Flegrei's risk was straightforward. Rising magma pushing upward toward the surface creates pressure. That pressure lifts the ground. If it lifts enough and fast enough, the rock above it fractures and an eruption occurs. That model is correct. It is also incomplete. And the part that was missing is the part that makes this system genuinely different from almost every other volcano currently being monitored on Earth. In 2023, researchers published a study focused specifically on the hydrothermal system beneath Pozzuoli, the city sitting at the center of the caldera. What they found had been present in the data the entire time. Nobody had fully modeled what it meant. Beneath Pozzuoli, superheated water and steam have been accumulating under pressure inside a sealed geological structure. Not a vent, not a conduit leading to the surface. a sealed chamber where pressure builds because the rock above it repeatedly cracks under stress and then reseals itself. The researchers called it the pressure cooker mechanism. When the rock seals, it traps the pressure. When it cracks, it releases some, but not all. The system reseals. The pressure builds again. Each cycle stretches the overlying rock further than it was before. This is not a gradual linear process. Each cycle compounds the previous one. The rock above the hydrothermal chamber is being incrementally weakened by a repeating stress cycle, and the pressure inside the chamber is incrementally increasing with each repetition. The question researchers were trying to answer was not whether this process was happening. The instruments confirmed it was. The question was, what happens when the rock above the chamber can no longer reseal fast enough to contain the next pressure spike? The answer is not a gradual release, it is a sudden one. And the magnitude of that sudden release depends on how much pressure has accumulated across how many cycles, which, at Campi Flegrei in 2026, is a number that has been building for more than 20 years. That was the 2023 study. The 2025 study found something that made the pressure cooker mechanism look like the beginning of the problem rather than the end of it. The 2025 research team used artificial intelligence to analyze seismic data from Campi Flegrei at a resolution that had not been applied to this system before. They were looking for patterns in how seismic energy propagates through the caldera's subsurface. What they found was not what they were looking for. Beneath the hydrothermal pressure system, below the pressure cooker, deeper into the caldera's structure, the AI identified a ring fault, a circular fracture structure running around the perimeter of the caldera at depth. Not a small feature, a geological structure consistent in scale with the caldera itself. A ring fault is exactly what it sounds like. A ring-shaped fracture in the Earth's crust that traces the boundary of a volcanic caldera. Ring faults form during large eruptions when the ground above a magma chamber collapses inward. They are, in effect, the scar tissue left behind by a previous catastrophic event. They are also a release mechanism. When stress builds inside a caldera system and a ring fault is present, the fault provides a pathway for that stress to discharge suddenly, not gradually, not through the incremental cracking of the pressure cooker mechanism, but in a rapid structural failure that can mobilize the entire caldera floor simultaneously. The ring fault at Campi Flegrei was not detected in previous monitoring. It was not in the models. Decades of seismic data had been analyzed, and this structure had not appeared in the results. The AI found it by identifying subtle patterns in wave propagation that human analysis had not flagged. This is the worst-case scenario hiding inside the system scientists were already afraid of. Not instead of the pressure cooker mechanism, in addition to it. The hydrothermal system builds pressure in cycles. The ring fault sits below it. If the accumulated pressure from the hydrothermal cycles reaches the ring fault's activation threshold, the release is not a pressure spike. It is a structural failure of the caldera floor. The 2025 study's conclusion was direct. The ring fault represents a previously uncharacterized risk pathway for Campi Flegrei that substantially increases the potential scale of a rapid unrest escalation. That is the language scientists use when they have found something they cannot fully quantify but cannot ignore. The ring fault had been there the entire time, and nobody knew. Here is the convergence point, the detail that every independent analysis of this system arrives at from a different direction but lands on the same number. Ground uplift rates, earthquake frequency analysis, carbon dioxide flux measurements at the surface. These are three separate monitoring streams drawing on three separate physical phenomena. They have been analyzed independently by separate research groups. All three converge on the same projected timeline, critical mechanical threshold between 2030 and 2034. Ground uplift is currently projected to reach approximately 4 meters above the 2005 baseline by the early 2030s. 4 meters is not a threshold that scientists chose arbitrarily. It is the point derived from stress modeling, where the caldera crust's ability to accommodate additional deformation without catastrophic failure drops sharply. The carbon dioxide flux data is the piece most people outside volcanology do not know about. As a hydrothermal system heats and pressurizes, the chemistry of gases escaping through surface vents changes. Carbon dioxide output at Campi Flegrei has been increasing at a rate that tracks directly with the ground uplift acceleration. CO2 is not just a passive tracer. High CO2 flux in a caldera context indicates that the hydrothermal system is actively heating, that fluids are evolving toward a more gas-dominated phase, and that the pressure contribution from the gas phase inside the sealed system is increasing. It is a direct physical indicator of the pressure cooker mechanism operating in real time. The earthquake frequency data adds a third independent confirmation. The rate of seismic events at Campi Flegrei has not been constant. It has been accelerating. The 2026 weekly earthquake counts are higher than the 2024 counts, which were higher than the 2022 counts. An accelerating trend in seismic frequency is a classic signature of a system approaching a mechanical threshold. 3 independent datasets, 3 different physical processes, 1 convergent timeline. This is not a single researcher's projection. It is the emergent conclusion of a monitoring system designed specifically to catch divergence and is instead confirming coherence across every channel. Now close the loop on the warning window, the one question this video opened that has not yet been answered directly. Campi Flegrei is monitored by INGV, Italy's National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology, continuously. Seismic arrays, GPS uplift sensors, satellite radar interferometry, gas flux monitoring, thermal imaging. The monitoring infrastructure is extensive and it is real-time. For a slow developing scenario, the kind where uplift gradually accelerates over months and seismic activity builds in clearly escalating patterns, the warning window could be weeks or months. Italy's civil protection system has the 500,000 person evacuation plan built around that scenario. The roads are identified, the shelters are designated, the alert levels are defined. For the ring fault scenario, the warning window is different in kind, not shorter by a matter of days, shorter by an order of magnitude. A ring fault failure is not preceded by the same gradual escalation signature as a magmatic intrusion. The triggering event could be a seismic episode indistinguishable from the dozens of earthquakes the system produces every week. The difference between a normal 4.5 magnitude earthquake at Campi Flegrei and one that triggers ring fault activation may not be detectable in real time. The 2025 study's authors were specific about this. They noted that the ring fault pathway represents a scenario where the usual precursory signals may be compressed or absent entirely. The system moves from background unrest to rapid escalation without the extended precursory phase that current evacuation protocols are designed to detect and respond to. 500,000 people. An evacuation plan built around warning windows that the ring fault pathway does not guarantee. And a system that has been quietly building pressure for more than 2 decades, while the feature most likely to determine how it releases went undetected until an AI found it in 2025. The Carrington event of space weather, the New Madrid fault in the American Midwest, Campi Flegrei in Italy. These are systems where the gap between what monitoring can detect and what response actually requires is measured not in comfort but in consequence. Campi Flegrei is the one where 500,000 people are already inside the gap. Here is where everything in this video lands. Campi Flegrei is not a theoretical risk. It is not a geological curiosity. It is an active, accelerating, monitored volcanic system sitting beneath 500,000 people with a documented alert status, a formal evacuation plan, and 2 new peer-reviewed studies that have fundamentally changed what scientists thought they were dealing with. The pressure cooker mechanism was missed for decades. The ring fault was missed for decades. Both were found because researchers kept looking, kept refining the models, kept applying new analytical tools to data that had been sitting in archives. That is what changed in 2023 and 2025. Not the volcano, the understanding of it. The timeline that 3 independent datasets converge on is not 2050. It is not the next century. It is 2030 to 2034. That is not outside the range of planning horizons. It is inside them, right now, today. The ground under Naples is rising 10 millimeters every month. The earthquakes are coming faster. The carbon dioxide is increasing. The AI found a ring fault that was invisible to everything that came before it. And the window between when this system reaches its threshold and when 500,000 people need to be somewhere else may be shorter than anyone's plan allows. If this video changed the way you understand what supervolcano unrest actually means, not as a distant geological term, but as a live infrastructure and human consequence problem, share it. The people who need to understand what Campi Flegrei is in 2026 are not only the ones already following geology channels. They are the ones who have never heard the words burning fields. Subscribe if you want to be ahead of the next escalation before the headlines tell you it already happened.